Thursday Weekly Wisdom guest edition, and today I'm welcoming Carl from the Fighting the Dad Bod. So I'm going to add Carl to this conversation because I cannot wait to get started with our chat today. I can't wait to have you here. So for those who don't know, Carl is previously started as a soldier, became an officer in the army. For over a decade, has been working in the mental health space, raising awareness as a speaker, raising money for charity, raising 25,000 individually, as well as, doing 42 marathons and breaking a Guinness World Book Record. So pretty phenomenal guy. And I think we're going to have some pretty fun conversations about what inspires him to do what he does, the wisdoms he's picked up along the way. So yeah, welcome, Carl. Hey, Carl, I was just introducing you to everyone.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm talking to the badass today. 42 marathons, which is insane. First of all, we're going to talk about why 42 marathons, and then Guinness World Record holder for burpees. And I don't know about anyone, but I hate burpees. I hate burpees from my CrossFit days. But you broke a record for them. So welcome, Kyle, and just your brand of megamania. So I can't wait to get started today and just learn a bit more about you. Tell us, what got you into this kind of mental health journey that you've been doing for the last 10 years? Speaking about it, sharing.
It's a tell you, when you sit there and listen to some of these things, you almost question it. Why have I done some of those? And what's that all about? Where do you want to start?
At the start, I mean, you started off as a soldier and then an officer. And then I think somewhere along the journey, something must have, I'm assuming, something instigated this desire to raise awareness around mental health. Was there a particular turning point for you?
So now I've got to compress about 20 years of life into a short and keep it interesting story. So joined the army as a soldier, as you said, and actually I didn't intend on joining the army initially. My plan was, I was at college and I wanted to be a teacher of the deaf. My best friend at the time was deaf. I was learning sign language. I was quite heavily involved with the local deaf community, but I was quite surprised to learn if you don't go to college or to study and don't get good grades, you can't go to university. So then who knew? So I kind of looked elsewhere and thought, right, let's give something else a go. And that turned out to be the army, and joined initially as a soldier. And basically I was kind of an engineer in the signals, dealing with telecommunications. The officer bit came later when I'd had a couple of recommendations and people said, you know what, you should consider this. But the problem is at the time is I didn't have the qualifications to do it. And this is kind of in the stage where typically an officer was A-levels, graduate, from a certain background as well. So it's an MBQ in telecommunications. So I met the minimum criteria. And that was one of the first times I'd successfully managed to find myself in a position where I enjoyed proving someone wrong. And there was, I was going for the army officer selection. There was this crusty old colonel. He said, well, bloody, you're not really the right sort, are you? But, all right, give me a chance here. And I took one of their entrance tests and got full marks on it. So delighted in going back to him, and then managed to obviously continue through and did a further 7 years as an officer. But the mental health bit, whilst elements of it very much appeared during the army time, I didn't really notice it as much. It wasn't until afterwards, when I got out, that things began to become an issue.
So you'd had this journey proving people wrong, I guess, because I guess they have a sense of a culture, who looks like an officer or etc. I'm guessing, and then you got the minimum requirement, you got in the door, and you were doing a job that you liked, and also biting your thumb at some other people. So then you leave the army, and then you're reflecting on stuff. Do you mind telling me a bit more about that?
Yeah, and it's something actually, when I went through it, I couldn't talk about it at all, but subsequently in this, when we talk a little bit later about me kind of talking on stage about this, I'm more comfortable sharing it. But in essence, I got out and I got involved in a business with someone, and the long story short, I'd come from an environment where everyone had your back, everyone was supportive, and you trusted those around you. So when I set this business up and became involved in it, it kind of all went horribly wrong, because people like that in the real world are not quite as common. There were people arrested and put in jail for some of the people that were working around me. I lost huge amounts of money, but around my mental health piece, the bit I struggled with is I started to lose my identity, not only as a man, but as a father, as just an individual in all senses, because I've gone from being an army officer. In my last job, I was out in Afghanistan, the detention subject matter expert for 5,000 troops in Afghanistan. There were times when the Secretary of Defence was ratifying decisions I was making. So it's kind of crazy level of pressure. So then I can't get out of bed. I'm struggling so much with the fact that I'm failing people that the symptoms start manifesting themselves physically. I start bleeding in places that you don't really want to be bleeding. And I just start closing down more and more and shutting myself away from people I'd spent time in the army with, friends, family, all those around me.
That sounds like a really difficult journey. But what led you to starting to share? Because, I mean, most people, when they have a difficult, I guess, experience like that, like you shared about the business and losing your sense of identity, they go in towards themselves. They don't do what you do, which you do podcasts, you talk about this on stage. I mean, what gave you the confidence? What pushed you? What motivated you to say, I'm gonna do this and share my journey?
Yeah, there was a couple of reasons for it. One was I felt so awful going through it myself. I wanted to do anything I could to try and help others avoid that. In the military environment, the army actually, their mental health problems while serving are less than your average civilian. They're about 1 in 8. It's when people from the military get out, they have a higher percentage of mental health problems. So the work I started doing was initially around the military communities, those just leaving and those veterans that had left, and trying to educate them of this is the real world, boys and girls, this is what it's like, these are some of the experiences. What I also then found is, and you'd have seen this yourself, the more you talk to people, and it's almost quite cathartic doing that, but they share their own journeys and stories with you, and you realise that you're not alone here. But it's quite a helpful process, having been able to share that, your own journey, what you've been through.
It's incredible. So sharing with people who come from the same kind of background, military, in that incubator where you're kind of protected, and then you come out in the real world and bam, and you realise that people are not quite what you thought, and you have to kind of go through that. And so be able to support them so they can cope better. That sounds incredible. But you have to tell me, because like a marathon is not an easy feat. So how did you go from, okay, I'm going to speak and help people and share my journey and go on that journey to create community around those who've experienced something similar and feel like validate your own experience as well as theirs, to then doing 42 marathons? Because that sounds like something else, Carl. And you have to tell us about your recent marathon and your training back as well on getting injured.
Well, the injuries are common thread running through it, and we can pick up on that. But the marathon piece, so basically I kind of picked myself up, I was in a better place, and then I was made redundant from a job. They completely did a restructure of the senior management team, and I just had an absolute relapse. And I thought to myself, oh, for God's sake, have I built and learned nothing from this? And what I ended up doing is I took myself away to Wales, and my plan was I was going to go walk in the hills and get back to nature, clear my head and have a rethink. But I climbed up this hill, and I got about 2/3, 3/4 of the way up. The heavens started opening, the fog came in, I fell over and tore my ankle. And it was, you know, when you get to kind of the stage, you sat there and go, really? Come on, give me a break here. And that's, I can say it in a lighter tone now, but at the time, it really made me think, what the hell am I doing with any of this? Because that negativity, those doubts start creeping in. So what I then did is I got myself together. I used a stick as a crutch and kind of took my way back down. I bought some water up. I had a cup of tea, which how quintessentially English is that? A nice cup of tea, that'll fix everything. But it was almost that. It was almost medicinal, just a hot, warm liquid going down your throat. And I sat there and went, I've got two choices here. I can either let this define me, or I can try and be better. So I then, from there, kind of travel back, and all these ideas going through my mind, and the marathon piece started. I'd attempted to get the London Marathon 7 times prior to that. Every time but never got a place in the ballot. So I've gone, I've done my bit. What more can I do? So this time I paid money and entered the New Forest Marathon. And this was May, and I had until September when the New Forest Marathon. I thought, right, now I've paid for it. I'm committed. Okay. And this is also when I started my Insta account as well, basically a fitness accountability. And I was telling people, right, I'm going to give this a go. So there's nowhere to hide now. That's where Marathon came in.
That's incredible. So basically, you're like, okay, I'm having this moment. I'm not gonna just like sit here in the mud, falling over, hurt myself. I'm gonna have a cup of tea and make a decision to change my life. And that's where Fighting the Dad Bod came about.
It's exactly
And
that.
you're
Yes.
training for your first marathon in New Forest.
Yes.
That's really cool. I like that. Why did you pick Fighting the Dad Bod, by the way? Because it always makes me like chuckle when I hear it.
It's actually, the first one I had was like everyone has, it's just my name. And then I was talking to a couple of people about what I was trying to achieve. And I think I'd made a joke about having the dad bod now. And it kind of came up talking through some. I thought, you know what? It's a fight that I'm sometimes, and even now, I sometimes win, I sometimes lose, and probably on the lesser side of victory at the moment. But I just like the idea of it. I wanted something as well that meant something to me, but also made people smile, because with all of this, and even from the military in darker times, you've got to have a little bit of humour as well, because sometimes that's what gets you through. So that was the rationale behind this. I then...
Well, it makes me laugh, so I think you're doing the right thing. It's hilarious.
So that first marathon, I'd gone into it. I wasn't injured. I was in really good shape. Physically, I was. What I didn't know is actually mentally, I'd hardly prepped at all. And also, being typically naive with the first marathon, regardless of the fact that I knew what not to do, I did everything wrong. I didn't fuel properly. I set off and got carried away because everyone's running really quickly, so I started running quickly. I didn't drink. Just everything you conceivably do wrong. And I blew up around mile 17. I absolutely crashed and burned and walked, limped, kind of harumphed my way to the finish line from there, and I vowed I would never do another one again.
No. That's incredible. So that's the first marathon, New Forest, you do it. Then how'd you go for marathon 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6? And I mean, I'm not going to carry on because that's ludicrous. I mean, come on, you've got to tell me about that. And also your fundraising as well.
So the two the marathons are kind of two distinct groups. The big baptism I actually decided in October, which was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. My mum sadly had breast cancer on 2 occasions. The second, we nearly lost her tissue really poorly, and it left her disabled. But I've had other friends, family members with it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do something for breast cancer. I want to do something big, something decent. And the problem is memory plays tricks on you. So it had been a little while since the marathon, and I'd enjoyed the endorphin rush of saying I'd done one. So I'd forgotten just how crap they really are. So I then made this commitment. So right, I'm going to do something big. I decided 2020, I like the synergy of the numerical piece, 20 marathons, 2020. Let's go for it. So I committed.
No, you went from 1 marathon to setting yourself to do 20 marathons. That's insane. I love insanity, but wow.
So that was the master plan. However, clearly, because I'm not clairvoyant, I didn't predict COVID. So what actually happened was, come March, COVID happens, and all of a sudden I'm going, it's really hard to enter all these races that don't exist, and we're stuck at home. So I then started having to get creative. So I did a marathon on my driveway, which running on the driveway is 10 meters long. It's about 4,000 lengths of the drive. And also because at this stage, I was starting to realize that the best way of getting attention to a cause and raising people's awareness was to go through this. So I climbed Everest on my stairs. So that was 4 days for 8.5 hours a day climbing the stairs. And the problem is with that, the downs don't count. So you go up, then you've got to turn around, come down, and then do it again and again and again. You go, oh my God. But what all this was doing was, it was starting to build that mental strength, that mental resilience that I hadn't had before, that I hadn't had the strength to do. So then I'm getting towards kind of the latter stage of the year. I've still got marathons outstanding. And it was actually a guy called Mike, who is in charge of the National Running Show. He said, well, I did 7 marathons in 7 days, Carl. I reckon you have to do something pretty spectacular to try and build and do this. So I went, okay. So I did 10 marathons in 10 days in 10 counties, dressed as a giant breast. With the idea being that I'm not fussed about how quick I go, but by running round, it's big boobs, squeaky nipple, I can actually engage people as well. So when they're asking, what are you doing? So actually I'm doing this to raise awareness and to put my body through some more pain, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of catching attention. And I quite like that, because actually it wasn't just the idea that it's a marathon, it's actually the idea of the repetition of something. You're going up and down the stairs, right? Because actually a marathon, in some ways, you get the whole, everyone else doing it. This almost feels like a personal battle, Carl against Carl, mind over matter. And you talk about how that experience helps you build more resilience. Like, talking to those who are going to watch this later or people who are joining us now, what are the things that you think help build that resilience? I mean, that's one thing, but from your experience, if you were giving the audience 3 bits of advice on this, what would you tell them? What 3 wisdoms would you share on this?
God, the pressure to have 3 now. They've got to be 3 good ones as well.
I just like 3. As many as you'd like, right. No pressure. It's a conversation.
So I think the first one for me is identifying just how key a role resilience can play in every single part of your life. Because it's people almost look at it as, oh, resilience is tough and it's sporting, but actually having that resilient mind can help you deal with the most innocuous of setbacks when you're low. It can help you deal with a difficult work problem or relationship. So being able to have some form of coping strategy or ability is really useful. The second one is I found, and over time, by doing a lot of these, and I went to some particularly dark places doing some of these, both physically I think it was day 9 of the challenge, because I've had a knee injury from serving the army. I've had surgery on it. I haven't got any cartilage, but the knee kept failing me, and so I kept collapsing. So I then had to double strap it just so I didn't keep falling over on it, so I could finish the miles. And horrific as that was at the time, and my feet are bleeding with blisters. Later, I was able to look back and go, do you know what? I've had hard times as well, and this doesn't feel like that. The other one kind of along that was doing this for other people. So doing it for breast cancer and on the mainstream marathons, if you like, not the ones I was doing on my own. You get talking to different people, and some of those stories are so powerful, so moving. You think, Christ, I'm in a bit of pain now, but in a little while I can go and I can get out of my wet clothes, I can patch up. There's people, and we all know that people struggle with terminal illnesses, serious physical disabilities, people who battle far worse than this every single day. So I can't really complain. And for me, that kind of kept building me up as well and helping me. So each time things did get hard, I went, you've either dealt with this before, or it could be bloody worse in fairness. So let's keep pushing forward.
I love that. Like, it could be worse. Doing the hard thing actually gives you evidence of you overcoming hard things. So when you have a hard thing, you're like, well, it's not as hard as that hard thing.
Exactly.
And I did the hard thing before, so why is this hard thing different? I love that. It's almost like putting some, I don't know, it's like showing yourself what you can do. It's like, this is what we can do. And I quite like the second one as well, because it's about having a strong story. Like, you run for causes, you've raised £25,000 individually for charity. Like, that is something that means something to you. And I guess for everyone who's looking at this, listening to this, saying, okay, what makes Carl so resilient and what makes him able to do this stuff and take his difficult challenges and actually help people, is clearly you found something that's bigger than you. You know, this, unfortunately, the sad story of your mum getting cancer twice, and kind of channeling that and the story of many other people to say, you know what, I'm going to do this thing because this is worth it. That's incredible. Do you have a third one? Jokes, don't have to.
No, but what I will give you is a couple of other examples of that kind of experience. So one, I did an ultra marathon. So it's the Portsmouth Coastal Ultra, and I tipped up to it. And it was really stupid things. It wasn't fantastically well organised that year. It was the first one after COVID. Big queues in the toilets, including people that weren't racing for another hour. Then the start line wasn't marked out, so I started late. And basically, I just started in absolutely the wrong frame of mind. I spent the first 2 miles moaning to anyone that would listen. Oh, this is rubbish. I hate this. And I'm thinking, hang a second. I've got a further 50 bloody K of this to do yet. What am I doing? And then again, you start talking to more people, and they then started talking, because I was at that stage, I used to wear head to toe pink. So I'd have pink wristbands, pink vests, pink shorts, pink socks, the whole shoot match. And you kind of start talking to them, and then they'd share your stories. And I'd find a bit of a double act. So I'd finish that event for breast cancer, but then there's a charity I promised I'd do some work with over Christmas, because that's, and I'll explain why in a second, but the charity was, you have a medicine ball handcuffed to you, and you carry that around for a week, and it's meant to be a physical representation of the mental burden people carry around them in terms of mental health. It's also a talking point. And the reason I got it at Christmas is because traditionally that's when suicide risk rates are higher, people struggle more. So because they knew I was in a good enough place to take it, I took that. But I took it straight after the race, and I did an interview straight after the race, and I just broke down in tears, because I went, you know, what the hell am I doing in terms of, why have I got so bothered and so upset about such silly, inconsequential things in life, when there's so much more important things to consider, and so many more people doing great things. So it was one of the first times, and I've done it several times since, where I was able to properly just release my emotions and I suppose just allow that to happen, and allow that process of healing, the cathartic piece again from going,
Yeah.
I've been through it and now I'm comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually really interesting, because when we talk about resilience, it often sounds like resisting emotions, being hard to emotions, being closed off, being rigid, inflexible, like an island by yourself. But actually, a lot of the stuff that makes you resilient is reaching out, is connecting with people, it's also feeling what you feel and not shying away from it. So actually, you're really challenging some of the ideas that so many of us have been kind of grown up with and assimilated on the idea that resilience looks like a shutdown, when for you was actually processing those emotions at that time. So obviously you don't get to carry the medicine ball all the time. So what do you do like regularly in daily life to help you process those emotions? Because I think we can all learn from that, I think.
Well, one of the things I've found is just being open and honest enough to talk about it. Whereas when I went through my darker time, I didn't. That was the problem. I not only couldn't see it myself, because I was, I suppose, almost putting on an act or a front for as long as I could, because I thought, I can't show people I'm struggling. I can't show people I'm weak. Whereas now it's actually going, you know what, I'm struggling a bit. I'm having a tough day today. And kind of just talking through it, giving that some airtime. And sometimes even that simple process of having a talk about it, you go, do you know what, it wasn't that bad actually. Or it's, no, I can see some of the early trigger signs of when things are getting a bit tougher. Let's start considering it. And this is where people do everything. They go out in nature, they meditate, they simply take time for them, they go for a run. And that was one of the things that I loved about doing the running piece, is the running community. And I think I'd missed that. Get out the forces where you've got that camaraderie. The running community have that. And I give another lovely example. I took Mum to Parkrun. For those that most people are aware, it's every Saturday, it's that 5K. And Mum comes down with her walker. She's never done any sort of distance like that before. I walked around with her with a walker and a couple of the tail walkers at the end. Took her an hour and 16 minutes. But over a dozen people waited and clapped her in at the end. And Mum's in tears, I'm in tears, we're going through, because that was her marathon. But I thought, what an incredible thing for her to go through. But also, that just says so much about the running community himself, the fact that they don't know her, they don't know me, and just to give that time to make that moment for her more special. I just thought that says so much, and it's one of the things I love about the community as a whole.
Wow. So we all need to find ourselves our own version of our running community, where people really have that kind of attitude, where they really do rally and they give you that time and space and give you those moments that are clearly ones that you remember for a lifetime. So where do we go about finding that? Because I mean, you found running. What are the ways that you would tell someone, like, if they were having that dark time and they're, you know, like, okay, Carl, I'm having a hard time. I'm saying to you, I'm having a hard time. I don't know what to do. I'd like to take some steps to be in a better place and create some systems for myself. What would you be saying to them?
Well, I would absolutely caveat, first of all, I am no expert. So quick disclaimer to put across there. But what I would talk to is some of the things that have worked for me. So first of all, the fact that they're even saying that to me, it's a huge step, because they're recognizing a problem. And what a massive thing, because how often do all of us go through life in denial? So what a great thing to have. The next one is, I talk, and depending on how well I knew them, it'd be trying to find what interests they have, because there are, as you know, communities everywhere. I mean, I use a really great example. There's a lady called Jess that set up something called Run, Talk, Run. And it's literally really similar. There you go. And Jess is, and I've done a couple of things with Jess, and that concept came from the same bit, that actually I'm going to walk, jog, plod, run, whatever I fancy, and talk about my problems. And there's no expectation. It's not transactional. I don't want something back, but sometimes talking about it, but knowing that someone's listening. And I don't mean, yeah, right, lovely. I mean, actually listening, actually taking interest in what you're saying. It makes a big difference, doesn't it?
So we're all seeking just to find a community where people will listen to us and we can listen to them.
I suppose
I love
as well,
that. I love that it's such a small world, because
I say but part of that as well is that those that recognise, yes, it's good to be around people, but other times, let's give you some space. Let's give you that time to either self-heal, self-meditate, whatever you need, just the time you need for you.
So we need a bit of that balance. I like that. I love that. Some good advice, Carl. I'm saying myself. I mean, there's some clear reasons why you get paid to go and talk about this stuff. You know what you're talking about, Carl, right? I'm loving this. I'm so glad that you're chatting with me today, because I'm really liking to delve into that. But why burpees? I mean, I detest a burpee. Who likes burpees?
Nobody.
Why is that the
Not
thing that
me.
you decided you're going to break a Guinness World Book Record on?
So this is entirely Dean Macy's fault. So I'd done, during lockdown, I'd started doing my interviews, and it's odd because I enjoyed the hosting bit and hearing other people's stories, but at that stage I wasn't massively comfortable sharing my own. I almost didn't feel, I had a bit of imposter syndrome. I didn't feel the right to be able to come on and share it. So what I did is I was very fortunate through some of the charity work I'd done. I had some Olympian connections, and that kind of built on. But I did a interview with Dean Mason. We were talking afterwards about various bits, and he said, well, every Christmas I do a challenge where we do a burpees lap the athletics track. And then it was one of those conversations that you're not sure how you both managed to get there, but before you knew it, it was, I know, why don't we try a world record for burpees? So this 6-person mixed team entered into this 12-hour chest-to-floor burpees. And what I have to say is, I've got so much time and respect for the other 5 who did it, because they're incredible people. But part of it as well was having a really powerful why. And the why in that instance was a charity that was very close to their heart. Dean was an ambassador for. And this poor little girl died at the age of 2 of brain cancer. And the idea of the charity is that it provides boxes, so gifts, support, packages, everything for those that have children with terminal illness. And it's called the Indie Rose Trust. And we were doing it for them. And I'll never forget, I'm there doing the burpees. And I'd been poorly a couple of days before, so really wasn't on good form. And I'm in a lot of pain, as everyone is. But around the audience are parents of children that have either lost children or children are terminal. So you're there going, God, I need to do this because we're raising money for it. Yes, it's Guinness World Record in Indy's name, but my God, that gives you another powerful why, and the emotional release when we've done it. So to not only finish that event, to physically do it, but to then, again, people are crying, breaking down because we're going, no matter what we're going through now, it's still far worse for you poor people that your children have only got a couple of years in life to live.
Oh. Wow. I mean, that I would do a million burpees for that. So yeah,
it helps.
Absolutely. You had me there. You absolutely had me there. You're right. And that is, I think that's such a powerful message to end on and to share with people, that for you and for all of us, ultimately, we're seeking to live a life that has meaning and purpose. But when we have that why, no matter the challenge, be it burpees, like it seems doable. It seems like something that we can climb to that Everest, that peak point, because we're doing it for such a good cause, something that matters to us. And in that moment, we can get that catharsis and that community. So maybe that's what we all need to do, try and figure out the things that we're willing to do something very hard for and start doing some really hard things. Because it seems like, listening to your story today, that's been a huge part of building your resilience.
It massively has. And I guess what I say to people as well is, give it a go, because even if you don't succeed with it, the strength you can take from even stepping out the door and giving it that go, because you can spend your whole life wondering what if you try, you're never quite sure what you're capable of. And what I have seen time and time again is the body will want to let you down far more before it actually does. If you can harden your mind in the right way, it continue pushing on. And I used, perfect example, that last marathon, so the one in London. It turns out I broke a bone in my foot at mile 9. And I really hadn't trained. I'd had other problems, but I kept going because I went, I can do this. I know I can do this. I can get through the pain piece. I knew it was a problem, but not so bad that I was going to cause myself lifelong problems. But and what I also had, which I loved, is around mile 20, I caught up with a soldier that I'd served in Afghanistan with 10 years before. And I say he was really struggling. He's like, Christ, I didn't ever imagine how hard this was. I've just got to get through one step at a time. So we kind of then buoyed each other going along. And you sometimes find, don't you, in the same way that helping people, they call it selfish altruism, don't they? That helping people, you get the rush for it. But bringing some along as well, it did help, because I almost felt I was responsible for him and to him. So we then continued pushing and progressing through. And people can see it. They can see when you are suffering, when you're struggling, when you're trying. And that helps. And then next time again, even if I hadn't finished, we could have said, well, I did so well because of, and I'm going to do better than that, and keep raising that bar for yourself.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for joining me. I've loved our conversation, and I've loved hearing about your story and getting this message of resilience across, and how to build resilience and that mental strength. So It's been so powerful.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I can't wait to have our conversation on your channel.
Yes, we'll give people a very quick hint. So we're going to switch the roles round, and obviously I've done my Carl's interviews over time, and I'm going to be bringing Aya on and grilling her to within an inch of her life. But no, it's going to be a lovely chat. We're going to hear all about your stuff, because so modest at times when you're recognising what I've done, but you actually will hear the fantastic accomplishments you've had in your time as well.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to joining, but thank you so much for joining me and being so open as well about your story.
My pleasure.
I think we learn so much from that openness. So thank you so much.
Take care and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.